It's time now for another edition of PatternCast Market Talk. That's where we talk about various assets, mostly futures, commodities, the things that we trade with our PatternCast service. One of the great things about PatternCast is that it trades all kinds of assets. We trade almost all of the major futures markets, the major Forex, and a very wide and growing list of equities. And that gives us the opportunity to learn more about these things that we wouldn't normally have, where most people might be just trading on the ES or silver or something. We look at it all. So we're going to recap all the assets that we've been talking about. Well, maybe not all of them, but a good portion of them, the ones that are most significant over the past, month and a half or so. And there's been some significant moves since we've made some of these discretionary calls.
Well, there have been some big moves, and I would just, first of all, I would say that people need to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're not subscribed, you're missing out, because the YouTube channel, we've actually made, every video that we do is substantive. There's no fluff. And you can go back and look at the things we've been talking about. And I'll start with natural gas. Back on April 22nd, natural gas is something that I personally like over the long term. And I like it, the closer you get to $1.50 on the NG, on the futures contract, the more excited I am about picking some up. From $2.50 on down over the next couple of years, that's a compelling story. But that's one that we haven't seen a lot of action out of. But the ones outside of that we have seen some movement in, with the ideas like orange juice and coffee and wheat. For example, on orange juice, we talked about orange juice on the 24th of April. And the symbol for orange juice is OJ. And man, you could have got orange juice futures from 100 all the way down to 90. And there was an easy entry on that. And Ernie, the high today was 112.60.
Jeez.
And so
I want people to understand the significance of that. Every dollar that orange juice moves, if you're holding a futures contract in orange juice, every dollar that it moves, that's an increase of $15,000. That is absolutely incredible, that move.
We talked about coffee on April the 26th, and we talked about the buy story in coffee. And check out the chart on that. That's gone from, you could have picked up coffee at 93 to 88, 89, somewhere in there. High today is 106.
Oh my God. All right. So I talked about OJ at 15K. Coffee is $37,500 per dollar move. Well, that's just unbelievable.
Well, what about one contract on wheat? We talked about wheat as a buy on April 29th, and at the time the wheat contract was 441. Call it 442. The low after that was 418. The high this week is 529. So, again, wheat, coffee, orange juice.
No, not only that, but we've also looked at Bitcoin as well, and there's been some recent moves in that. These are like discretionary calls that we're making on top of the calls that PatternCast generates for us.
The amazing thing about Bitcoin, Ernie, is that we did more than one video on that topic, and I gave specific prices, 7,800, 8,800, 9,800. And in the live room, in our live Discord room, I literally speaking at each example was talking about how I was going short, how I was doing it. In fact, on Bitcoin over the weekend at 8,700, I went out of Bitcoin into gold and silver. Gold and silver are up, and Bitcoin went from 8,700, and Ernie, as I'm talking to you now, Bitcoin's at 7,500. And these were all done full with our hand totally exposed in the live room and on YouTube.
And I was also making similar calls, but you're doing things from price action point of view. I usually do things from a volume profile point of view, and it's amazing how much similarity there is in terms of your calls and my calls, and also with PatternCast, which knows nothing about volume profile, knows nothing about price action. It just uses or generates these dynamic patterns over long periods of time. Where do you think Bitcoin goes from here?
You want to know where I think it's going to go?
Yeah, I want to know where you think it's going to go, because you said 9,800, 8,800, and now I want to know.
Well, look, all the signals that I talk about are not predictive. They are reactive. If something happens, I'm going to do this. So I don't have to predict it. I'm just telling you, if it goes to 9,800, I'm going to go short. I don't have any prediction on where it's going to go next. Now, if it moves down, down is harder than up, but I'm going to say, let me just throw a thumbnail up in the air and, How about if Bitcoin were to drop to 5,300? It would have to do that over the next week here. If it did that, I would probably cover shorts and I might take a long position.
Yeah, I personally like around 6,700.
But, again, that's the difference in what we're doing. And what PatternCast also does is PatternCast does not predict. It says, if this happens, then statistically this thing happens a certain percentage of the time in the last 20, 30, 40 years. And it's why I like PatternCast above all other signal services I've ever seen or been a part of. We're not having to say, okay, at the open, it's moving up. At the open, it's moving down. We're saying, listen, let other people push in their chips, make their decisions, bad or good. And if we get a certain price and under certain circumstances and on a certain day, when that happens, then we'll make a decision.
It's interesting the way that works out because, where most people are trying to grab a hold of a particular price action and say, okay, I recognize that pattern, we're going to go for it. We find all these different scenarios, and it's really looking for kind of extremes and then retracements, or at least that's what PatternCast seems to be doing, and looking in the future, saying something like, man, if it makes this wild-ass move, there's a very high likelihood it's going to go the other way.
Right. Another one we talked about also, Ernie, I don't want to leave cotton out. Cotton we talked about a few weeks ago, and it's moved from, 65 or so to the high this week was 69. It's not as big a mover as the orange juice, the wheat, or the coffee, but it's still a positive gain.
Yeah, so what I'll do is at the end of this video, I'll show some end cards and links to those videos so that you can go back and then see our original analysis and where it's gone today.
Cool. Okay. Well, you mentioned how we like to talk about these markets because they're interesting. It really is interesting. It's more fun to me to think about orange juice than it is just some squiggly lines on a screen. But PatternCast doesn't care whether it's orange juice or oil. And so with PatternCast, that really is, no matter what we talk about from a discretionary standpoint, we've had some good calls, and that's really neat. And so intuitively, we've thrown some good ideas out there. But at the end of the day, if PatternCast says it, I give that more credence over whether I say it or you say it or anybody else says it.
Yeah, well, see, the reason why I brought that up is that there have been many members that have brought that up to me saying, look, we're trading things that I never would have traded before. And it's really refreshing because they're getting into these things without having to really get into them. In other words, PatternCast doesn't care about the fundamentals. They just only see the signals. But it gives them an opportunity to trade things that they haven't, and it's opening up their eyes to these markets.
Yeah.
And so that's the great thing about PatternCast. You can trade these markets with the signals, make money, and then start getting into the markets because they're interesting, not because you're sitting there trying to figure out what the hell's going on and try to make money off of some guess.
Yep, that's what I like about it. The stories are interesting, but it's always better not to have to guess, especially for the short term, and that's why I love PatternCast.
Same here, man. Do you like to guess which story to believe before you make money? PatternCast gives you a way to avoid that guessing game. PatternCast lets you focus on what you can control. PatternCast simplifies your trades, allows you to develop confidence, and helps you overcome fear and uncertainty and doubt, the primary reasons you make bad decisions with your money. PatternCast. Timely, reliable signals that work.